I think the really important thing with this issue is we're going to start off accepting where we are. Now, it may be that you're someone who thinks they're really delighted with the amount of immigration over recent decades, or maybe you're someone who thinks there's been far too much. But the fact is we are where we are. So if people start going down the line of, like, I don't like there being so many immigrants here, even if they're citizens or whatever, what can we do about it? How can we get rid of them? How can we get them to... As soon as you start thinking down those lines, you're falling off the end of the spectrum. It's completely unrealistic, it's never going to happen, and it would be completely unfair to try and make that happen. So then that's a path that's completely destructive. The question was phrased in terms of race. I think people sometimes see race as a proxy for culture. If you've got people of a different race, then they're probably of a different culture. And I think if people see an increasing number of people from other cultures, that would likely go with a weakened sense of rootedness, a weakened sense of national identity. And I think they're rational concerns, and that's perfectly reasonable to have those. But they're concerns that can be addressed through aiming at integration and assimilation. Give it time and make a conscious effort at it, like, for example, the way the USA does. Then I think you can forge a united nation out of that. The problem with framing the issue as primarily about race is that, in a sense, is hopeless, because there's no solution to that. Those people are not going to change race. So your only solutions are completely unacceptable, which is why I think bringing in race into politics is potentially dangerous. Whereas if you see them in terms of culture and assimilation, a united society, etc., then that's things you can work on, and you can be optimistic, and you can restrict immigration in the meantime, but you can work on it and you can have a positive vision of the future, which I think is really the only option. I heard of something recently. It was a really surprising story. I think it was Denmark is offering to pay refugees to go back. I think it's offering something like 20,000 euros or something to go, and they can change their mind. They can go back, and within a year they can change their mind and go back to Denmark. So they are offering an incentive. I think when you're dealing with refugees, then I think a country accepting refugees, that's a different matter. When the danger's passed, then I think it's reasonable for a country to say you can come and stay for the duration of the danger, but then we'd like you to go back in. I think that's perfectly reasonable. For people who are settled here and have got citizenship, I think to even suggest that there's an intention to incentivize them leaving the country, I think that's not a moral option to even suggest that to people who are citizens. Because I think once you've crossed that boundary, you may believe that the nation's made terrible mistakes in the past in allowing so many people to come and become citizens, but then once they are, you've got to treat them fairly and find a way forward, rather than go back to that. That's my view very strongly. The other thing with that, if you imagine that you were let's say you're Pakistani, say, and the government offers an incentive for anyone of Pakistani ancestry to go back to Pakistan, the message delivered inevitably is, we'd be quite keen to get rid of you. So if you wouldn't mind considering it, it's inevitable, it can't be avoided that you're delivering that message. And if you want assimilation and harmony, I don't think that's the way to get it.
Okay, Richard.
Yeah, I would say there are some benefits from immigration. I think sometimes they're overplayed by proponents of it, but there are some benefits. There are also some potential problems as well. So it depends on the amount and the nature of it. I think they're the really important questions. It's not about a headline figure. There's a lot of other relevant factors as well. And Stephen mentioned cultural distance. I think that's a very significant factor, very definitely. What tends to happen with immigration? If you say you've got a little town, the first couple who move there from a new country, then they integrate completely. They've got to learn the language, and people quite like having someone a bit different, brightens the place up, and that's quite good. Everything's perfect. But if then a relative comes over and joins them, so that's still great, but maybe there might be a slightly less integration. And then more people are thinking, right, shall we go over and move to that town? Well, they think, well, yeah, we'd already know people there. There'll already be people who speak our language. And people will start then moving to a country without really the intention of integrating. So if you allow large communities, sort of isolated communities to grow, immigration into them will accelerate and accelerate, because the cultural barrier seems to be very low. And I think that's what's happened in some areas of England, and I think that creates problems, it creates tensions. And I think if Scotland could avoid those sort of issues in the future, then that would be a wise move. And so I think assimilation is really important, and I think at the moment, sort of a bit of a pause to have a few decades to let things settle down and to allow assimilation and integration to take its course. But this is not a fast process. This is a multi-generational process in many cases. So that needs to be allowed to happen. And just to echo what Stephen said about birth rates, okay, the assumption is, you hear Nicola Sturgeon talking, the only way to deal with a falling population is mass immigration. No consideration of abortion, which currently more than bridges the gap between the number of births and deaths in Scotland, and encouraging family size, which government policy could definitely do.